When a broke young mechanic spent his last paycheck fixing a stranger's Harley for free, he thought he was just being kind, but 3 days later, a dozen Hell's Angels rolled up to his garage, with engines rumbling like thunder. What happened next would change everything he thought he knew about loyalty, brotherhood, and the unwritten laws of the road. But here's what everyone wants to know. What exactly do the Hell's Angels do when they find someone who's proven they understand the old code? The fluorescent lights buzz overhead in Tommy's cramped garage like angry wasps trapped in glass coffins, casting harsh shadows across grease-stained concrete as the smell of motor oil, burnt coffee, and years of honest work mingles in the thick afternoon air that hangs heavy as a wet blanket, soaked in memories and broken dreams. Tommy Rodriguez, barely 22 with calloused hands that betray years beyond his age, and dreams bigger than this dying Rust Belt town that time forgot, hunches over a broken-down Harley Davidson, like a surgeon preparing for the operation that will either save or damn his patient. His worn Metallica t-shirt, already soaked through with sweat despite the October chills seeping through damaged windows, clings to his lean frame as he carefully dismantles the engine with the precision of a master craftsman and the reverence of a priest performing last rites over a fallen warrior. The chrome reflects his focused face in fractured pieces, brown eyes narrowed in concentration like a sniper's scope, dirt permanently embedded under his fingernails, like badges of honor from a lifetime spent bringing dead machines back to life. A small scar above his left eyebrow from the time he learned that engines bite back when you're not paying attention. His grandfather's tools, polished smooth by decades of use, feel like extensions of his own body as he works, each wrench and socket carrying the weight of family tradition, and the ghost of old Ramon's voice whispering about patience and respect for the machines that carry men's souls down endless highways toward whatever salvation they're seeking in the wind and rain and burning asphalt. Behind him, leaning against a rusted tool cabinet, with arms crossed and the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders like a lead blanket, stands a grizzled man in his 50s, who looks like he's been carved from old leather and disappointment-worn vest that's seen 1,000 miles of highway and heartbreak, gray beard streaked with white like frost on autumn grass, eyes that have witnessed more sunrises and buried more friends than any man should carry in the secret chambers of his heart. The stranger's boots are worn through at the heels, his jeans faded to the color of old denim and older dreams, and when he shifts his weight from foot to foot, leather creaks like old saddles, remembering better days when riders were younger and roads led somewhere that mattered. "She's been with me 23 years, the stranger says quietly, his voice rough as sandpaper dragged across cedar planks, thick with emotion he's trying to swallow like bitter medicine. "Through 3 divorces that took everything I thought I loved. 2 kids who won't talk to me anymore because I chose the road over birthday parties and school plays. And more miles than I can count or want to remember because some numbers hurt too much to add up." His battle-scarred fingers trace the Harley's fuel tank like he's touching the face of a lost lover, and Tommy catches the slight tremor in those hands. The way they shake just enough to betray years of hard living and harder choices, of nights spent in roadside motels and mornings that brought nothing but more highway stretching toward horizons that never get any closer. Hours pass like a meditation broken only by the symphony of rain, drumming harder against windows and the methodical clink of tools against metal as Tommy works deeper into the Harley's mechanical heart, his fingers moving with practiced grace through a maze of cables and pistons, while sweat drips steadily onto the oil-soaked floor like a metronome counting down to some inevitable reckoning. The stranger watches every movement, with the intensity of a man whose entire world sits broken and vulnerable on that grease-stained workbench, occasionally muttering prayers to whatever gods protect machines and the men who love them. His storm-tested face, a map of worry lines carved deeper with each component. Tommy removes and examines under the cold white bulbs that make everything look sicker than it really is. The bike's problems reveal themselves slowly, like layers of an infected wound being peeled back by a surgeon's steady hand. A fractured engine block that would cost $1,500 to replace at any legitimate shop. Transmission with gears ground down to metal shavings that glitter like deadly snow in Tommy's palm. Electrical system fried beyond recognition by years of neglect and the kind of bad luck that follows some men like hungry dogs. Tommy's stomach tightens as he calculates the real cost in his head. Numbers that dance behind his eyes like demons. $3,500 minimum for parts alone, not counting the 40 hours of labor this resurrection will require. Repairs that would cost more than this beautiful machine could ever be worth on any dealer's lot, where salesmen in cheap ties peddle dreams to weekend warriors who've never felt real wind or real freedom. The stranger counts his crumpled $20 bills again, smoothing each one like it's made of gold leaf, his hands shaking, not from age, but from the desperate mathematics of a man whose entire fortune wouldn't buy a decent meal at the fancy restaurants where rich folks eat food they can't pronounce. Behind Tommy on the cluttered desk where invoices pile up in towering stacks that threaten to topple, final notices from the landlord scream in red ink about 3 weeks of overdue rent, while his girlfriend Sarah's worn photograph smiles from beside the ancient cash register, her diner uniform, a constant reminder that she's been pulling double shifts just to keep their dreams alive, and their small apartment above the Chinese restaurant from becoming another casualty of circumstances beyond their control. Every rational part of Tommy's brain screams to quote the real price and send this specter of a man back to whatever highway spawned him. But something in those desperate eyes, something in the way the stranger's voice cracked when he talked about 23 years of memories riding on 2 wheels, makes Tommy's hands keep working, as components spread across his work surface like organs waiting for transplant. The lie comes easier than expected when the stranger asks about cost, smooth as motor oil flowing from Tommy's lips. Looks worse than it is. Probably 400, maybe 5 to get her purring like a kitten again. He watches relief flood the stranger's road-hardened features like sunrise after the longest night. And when those shaking hands press exactly $437, obviously everything this broken man has in the world, into Tommy's palm, he pockets the money, knowing it won't even cover the parts he'll need to resurrect this mechanical corpse, knowing he'll be eating ramen noodles and broken dreams for the next month, while Sarah works herself toward exhaustion and his own plans to expand the shop die, in service of a stranger's desperate prayer for one more ride. When the Harley finally roars to life 6 hours later, the sound reverberates through the garage like thunder rolling across distant mountains. A mechanical symphony that makes both men stop breathing for a moment, as chrome vibrates and pistons sing their ancient song of power and freedom. The stranger's eyes fill with tears he's too proud to let fall, his sun-beaten face breaking into a smile that erases 20 years of hard living as he listens to his machine's heartbeat steady and strong, purring like a contented cat in the brightly lit sanctuary Tommy has created from spare parts and stolen hope. She sounds better than she has in years, he whispers, running his palm along the fuel tank with the tenderness reserved for lovers and lost children. And Tommy feels something warm expand in his chest, despite the cold knowledge that his own bank account now sits emptier than a ghost town church. The stranger tries to press another handful of crumpled 20s into Tommy's palm, stammering about paying the rest next week, next month, whenever the VA check comes through, or he finds work hauling freight cross-country, not knowing that Tommy had already spent his last paycheck on the transmission fluid and gaskets that brought this beast back from steel and chrome death. "Keep it," Tommy says, wiping his hands on an oil-stained rag that's seen 1,000 such moments. "Just promise me you'll ride her safe out there." And as the man fires up the bike and disappears into the night with a grateful wave, his taillights bleeding red into the darkness like dying stars, Tommy thinks, That's the end of it. Another random act of kindness in a world that rarely notices them. Swallowed by the vast indifference of highways stretching endlessly toward horizons no map can measure. But 3 days later, as Tommy struggles to fix a lawnmower that should have been scrapped years ago, using duct tape and prayer to hold together rusted metal while his stomach growls from another skipped meal, the deep throb of motorcycle engines grows louder and louder until it shakes the very walls of his garage like an earthquake built from chrome and leather and barely contained violence. Through the garage door windows streaked with grime and fingerprints, Tommy sees a sight that makes his blood run cold. As winter rivers, a dozen Hell's Angels, rolling up like a storm front made flesh. Their machines gleaming, despite the dust of 1,000 miles. Leather cuts, bearing patches that tell stories of brotherhood and blood, eyes hidden behind sunglasses that reflect nothing but trouble, and the kind of justice that never sees the inside of a courtroom. The stranger from 3 nights ago leads the pack, but he looks different now. Less broken, more dangerous, transformed by the brotherhood surrounding him like armor forged from shared scars and unspoken oaths. Tommy's hands tremble as he reaches for the wrench that won't save him, his mind racing through every crime movie he's ever seen, every story whispered about what happens when you cross the wrong people. And for one terrifying moment that stretches like taffy, under intense pressure, Tommy wonders if his act of kindness was actually a death sentence, signed in motor oil and delivered by men who write their own laws on the roads that snake between order and chaos. The garage falls silent except for the tick of cooling engines and Tommy's pounding heartbeat as the bikers dismount, their heavy boots echoing on concrete like a funeral march, while leather creaks and chains rattle with each measured step toward the workbench where Tommy's future hangs in the balance. The air grows thick with tension, and the smell of road dust mixed with something more dangerous, the scent of men who've traveled far to settle accounts in ways that don't involve lawyers or judges or mercy for the weak. Tommy's mouth goes dry as desert sand, as the stranger, who now seems less ghost than general, surrounded by his brothers in arms, walks forward, with something glinting in his time-worn hands that catches the harsh overhead lighting, like a blade, or a badge, or a promise of pain. "Boys," the man announces, his voice carrying the weight of authority Tommy hadn't recognized before, the kind of command that comes from leading men through wars, both literal and metaphorical. "This is the kid I told you about, the one who fixed my ride when I had nothing left to give but respect and gratitude." Instead of the violence Tommy expected, what emerges from the stranger's palm is a thick roll of cash, rubber banded tight as a fist, and something even more precious, a leather patch embroidered with wings and skulls, and the words, "Friend of the Angels," a rare and sacred thing in their world that means protection, brotherhood, and a debt that can never be fully repaid. The garage fills with rough laughter and backslapping as the truth emerges like dawn breaking through storm clouds. The broken-down stranger is actually Marcus Ghost Sullivan, whose real identity Tommy was only now learning, a founding member of this chapter who'd been riding alone for years after losing his brothers in a highway accident that left him questioning everything he believed about loyalty and family, testing every mechanic he met from coast to coast to see if any still understood what it meant to help without expecting anything in return. In Tommy's small act of grace, fixing a bike with his last dollar for a man with nothing, Ghost had found something he thought had died with the old ways. Proof that honor still exists in a world gone cold and calculating. That some people still measure wealth in kindness rather than cash. As the bikers load Tommy's broken toolboxes with top-shelf equipment that gleams like treasure, and Ghost presses an envelope thick with enough cash to save the garage and Tommy's dreams into his trembling hands, Tommy realizes that sometimes the smallest kindnesses echo the loudest, rippling outward through communities and across lives in ways we never expect, like stones thrown into still water, creating circles that touch shores we'll never see. The angels roar away into the sunset that paints the sky red and gold, leaving behind the scent of freedom and the promise that Tommy will never work alone again, that he's now part of something larger than himself, bound by invisible threads to brothers he may never meet, but who will always have his back. Standing in his garage as twilight settles like a blessing over the small town that suddenly seems less small, Tommy thinks of his grandfather's words about treating every bike like family, finally understanding that family isn't always bound by blood. Sometimes it's forged in the sacred space between strangers, in moments of grace that transform both giver and receiver, in the recognition that we're all just broken down machines looking for someone skilled enough and kind enough to help us run again.